Well, for pretty much all of 2013, it was assumed by many in the media and many fans that the Denver Broncos were not only going to make it to the Super Bowl, but it was their destiny, their fate to win the Super Bowl. And that way everybody could crown their asses and kiss Peyton Manning's ass some more. And it was close until the Super Bowl actually happened. The Broncos still had a hell of a season, even though they still ended up losers just like 30 other teams in the National Football League. They went 13-3. They ended up winning the AFC West. They got home field advantage throughout the playoffs in the AFC, which they put to good use as they beat San Diego and then New England. They got to the Super Bowl, and then they got steamrolled. It was like a snowball that just rolled downhill, and shit happens. And the Denver Broncos find themselves in kind of a precarious position because they are clearly in a win-now mode. They have no choice. Their window of opportunity is however long Peyton Manning is their quarterback. And in and of itself, that presents a challenge. So you know you have to throw everything you can at winning a Super Bowl right here, right now. History is also not on the Denver Broncos side. There's been a total of 5 different teams throughout the history of the Super Bowl, and this is 48 Super Bowls now, where a team lost the Super Bowl one year and went back the next. And that's kind of that Super Bowl curse or that Super Bowl hangover that the Denver Broncos are going to have to overcome this year. You're talking about the Cowboys of 71-72. 70-71, excuse me. You're talking about the Dolphins of 71-72. You're talking about the Vikings of the mid-70s. You're talking about the Broncos under Elway in 86 and 87, and the Bills in 91, 92, 93. Think about that. There's only 5 teams, and I think I've got them all. The Cowboys and Dolphins of the early 70s, the Vikings of the mid-70s, the Broncos of the mid-80s, and the Bills of the early 90s. So it's been over 20 years since a team that lost the Super Bowl made it back to the Super Bowl the following year, let alone considering winning it or anything else. So history is not on the Denver Broncos side. So I was not surprised, the point being, to see John Elway become incredibly aggressive this offseason. He spent some money. He went for broke. He brought in Aqib Talib from the New England Patriots. He brought in T.J. Ward from the Cleveland Browns. He brought in DeMarcus Ware from the Dallas Cowboys. He brought in Emmanuel Sanders from the Pittsburgh Steelers. You also got, along with those kind of big money signings, if you will, the drafting of Bradley Roby in the first round, the return to help, hopefully, for the organization of all-pro talents like Ryan Clady and Von Miller. That's kind of like bonus, so to speak, because you didn't get much of anything out of them at all on a team that went to the Super Bowl last year. But the Broncos, it's kind of the curse of being a very good team, which the Broncos are, and making it to the Super Bowl, is that players come up for free agency, players want to get paid, and you got to make some tough choices. So they lost Eric Decker and Noshan Moreno and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie and Sean Phillips and Zane Beadles and Wesley Woodyard. They lost several starters and a couple of really key starters off of their Super Bowl team. So it was a turbulent offseason for the Denver Broncos as far as I'm concerned. And now you look at the fact that they don't have Matt Prater, their kicker, for the first 4 games of the season because of his battle of the booze. And you've got Wes Welker apparently all mollied out at the Kentucky Derby, who they've now lost also for the first 4 games of the season due to his violation of the league's substance abuse policy. Very interesting times ahead for the Broncos in 2014. Now looking at this team, heading into the season, some of the strengths. Peyton Manning, clearly, to me, arguably the greatest regular season quarterback of all time. That is a compliment and kind of a backhanded slight all at the same time. Yes, it is. But there is no question. When you have Peyton Manning in your lineup in the regular season, that usually bodes very well for you in the regular season. And in order to worry about the playoffs, frankly, you got to get through the regular season first, and you got to make the playoffs. And you can pretty much count on the fact that if you've got Peyton Manning as your starting quarterback and he plays every week, that you're going to make the playoffs. So that is like an ultimate advantage. And when you have Peyton Manning, it helps so many other things go in order. They also still, even with the losses of guys like Eric Decker and Noshan Moreno, the suspension of Wes Welker for the first 4 games of the season, they still got a tremendous amount of skill talent in that offense. You're looking at Monte Ball, the running back they took in the 2nd round last year out of Wisconsin. I anticipate he'll be able to fill Noshan Moreno's shoes relatively well. You look at their number one wide receiver, Demaryius Thomas. You've still got him in the fold. You've got your stud tight end, your athletic freak, Julius Thomas, in the mix as well. You've got Emmanuel Sanders. You've got other guys like Andre Caldwell, perhaps your second-round pick, Cody Lattimore, the wide receiver out of Indiana, gets a chance to step up and show what he can do early on in the season. There's still plenty of weapons in this Denver Broncos offense, and along with getting back a hopefully healthy Ryan Clady for all of 2014, you're giving Peyton Manning even more time to throw, which ultimately means that the skill players could still put up some big numbers. Maybe not as big as 2013, but that doesn't mean that this offense is going to be boo-boo. No way, shape, or form is that going to happen. I also look at their linebacking core. Whenever they get anything out of Danny Trevathan, hopefully they've got a healthy Von Miller. What they've got in the middle, I'm not so sold on yet, but in general, I like what they do with their linebackers, and I like the linebackers fit in this scheme. So I would say in terms of units on that defense that I like, it'd probably be the linebackers, even though their defensive line isn't that far behind. They've got a couple of higher draft picks in recent years, guys like Derek Wolfe and Sylvester Williams that I expect to play decent roles. But looking at some of the question marks for this team, I do still question the offensive line a little bit. Yes, you get back Ryan Clady, but Ryan Clady's absence alone wasn't why the Broncos got decimated so badly by that Seahawks front four in the Super Bowl. They really struggled with that front four of Seattle. They really struggled with their speed, athleticism, and versatility and ability to get into the backfield. And I'm not sure in the offseason that the Broncos did an effective enough job of filling that void or solving that problem. Maybe they went for splashier, sexier signings and moves as opposed to necessarily the right ones. I look at the secondary. The secondary was boo-boo, and they were exposed too in the Super Bowl horribly. This was a defense at times that was god-awful in 2013. With or without Von Miller and others, it didn't even matter. The defense was terrible, and that secondary was atrocious. And even bringing in an Aqib Talib, is he really an upgrade over Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie? You draft a Bradley Roby in the first round, but this was a Bradley Roby that was decimated in the Wisconsin game by Jared Abbrederis last year for Ohio State. And Abbrederis destroyed Roby, and Abbrederis is a fifth-round pick who's now missing the year with an ACL injury, and Roby was a first-round pick. Roby's a guy that looks the part, but sometimes that's the problem. He looks the part, and he doesn't actually play the part. And then you bring in a guy like TJ Ward. You needed a rangy kind of center fielder type of safety, and instead you bring in the box safety like a TJ Ward. I got some serious questions about their secondary. I've got some questions about whether or not this team is starting to fall apart at the seams a little bit. Wes Welker's suspension, Matt Prater's suspension. Some of this stuff is just not good. And when you throw into account that only 5 organizations the year after losing a Super Bowl have actually made it back to the Super Bowl, and that hasn't happened for over 20 years, I have some serious questions about whether or not this team is going to have a huge Super Bowl hangover come 2014. Looking at their schedule, they've got the AFC East, the NFC West, Cincinnati, and Indianapolis. Some of the key marquee games, I guess you'd say. Week 3, they go to Seattle, so it's a rematch of Super Bowl 48. Week 7, they host San Francisco, a team that I feel would have trounced Denver as well in Super Bowl 48 if they would have played them. And then Week 9, it's a rematch of the AFC Championship game. The national media and fans of big, white, and mobile pocket passers everywhere rejoice and masturbate as the Denver Broncos travel to New England. It's Manning versus Brady one more time, and everybody goes, Anyways, so those are some of the key games to kind of watch, along with the Cincinnati and Indianapolis matchups. Keys to success for this team: they got to stay healthy. That's something that they definitely need. They need the defense to play better. That defense was very bad last year, especially at some key times, and especially in the Super Bowl. They need that defense to not be great, but they need that defense to at least be adequate. They need that defense to be able to hold its own and sometimes make some big stops, God forbid. They need a little bit more balance on offense, too, because I think if you're expecting Peyton Manning to put up the same type of numbers that he did in 2013, you might be asking too much out of a guy who I believe is now going to be, 38 years old? You might need to back off of Peyton just a little bit and utilize Monte Ball in the running game a little bit more. Get a little more balance on offense, and that might be a good way to protect Peyton Manning, protect your team in terms of not putting too much burden on his shoulders, because frankly, that's part of the failures of Peyton Manning over the years in big spots and big moments, no matter how much anybody wants to spin it, is because too much is put on his shoulders. He's too analytical. He thinks too much. And the more he's thinking, it's kind of paralysis by analysis, and he kind of shuts down and he doesn't play as well. He doesn't play loose. He doesn't play relaxed. And the team follows suit. So to take some of that pressure off of him, to allow him to play a little looser, a little bit more relaxed as much as you can, will allow the team around him to play looser and play relaxed as well. They also need some of these free agent signings and big moves they made in the offseason to pay off big. They're going to need Emmanuel Sanders to play well, to not only kind of replace Eric Decker, or at least in the meantime, replace Wes Welker, if nothing else. They need Akib Talib to be a number one corner. They need TJ Ward to be ferocious in the box safety. They need DeMarcus Ware to be that supreme outside pass rusher as a 4-3 defensive end. But my prediction for the Denver Broncos is that this is still one of the better teams in the National Football League. But personally, I think based off of history and based off of the Denver Broncos and the way they're constructed, I think it's foolish to expect them to do the exact same thing, if not improve on what they did last year. I think this is an 11-5 team. I still think they'll finish first in the AFC West, but I think they'll fall short of going to the Super Bowl. I really do. Again, I talk about it with John Elway. He made a lot of moves, but those moves didn't necessarily improve the football team. Was Talib really an upgrade over DRC? Especially when Darrelle Revis was on the market. TJ Ward, was he really the right type of safety that you needed? If you were running the 3-4 exclusively, DeMarcus Ware might be a tremendous addition, especially on the other side of Von Miller as an outside linebacker. The problem is you're bringing in DeMarcus Ware to all these years of past accolades in a 3-4 system, and you're now sticking him in as a 4-3 defensive end, where he was okay in the time that he did play in Dallas last season, but he wasn't nearly the same player. You're asking Emmanuel Sanders, I think, to maybe do more than he really should. A lot of these moves, you lose Noshawn Moreno. Is Monte Ball really an upgrade over him? You lose Eric Decker. Is Emmanuel Sanders or even Cody Lattimore, those guys upgrades over him? You lose DRC. You lose Sean Phillips. Is DeMarcus Ware really that big of an upgrade? I'm just not seeing where this team got better. I think, in fact, in some areas they've gotten worse. I think there's going to be a bit of a Super Bowl hangover. They'll still be a good team. They'll still be a bit of a force. But I think it's foolish to expect the Broncos to make it back to Super Bowl 49, and especially expect the Denver Broncos to win Super Bowl 49.